Hi, this is Lisa and welcome to my channel. Today I am going to be making a Western Pleasure side saddle. However, I am not designing the pattern. What I have done is taken somebody else's pattern and we're going to discuss how to modify other people's patterns. And you may find this interesting if you're using one of mine and you want a different look or whatever. I have taken Carrie's pattern from Model Horse Tack School or Karaoke, and I will put the link to her pattern below. And then we are going to walk through how to change the Steele saddle, her Steele Western saddle, into a Western Pleasure saddle for Arabians, which I have pictures coming up and you'll see what I'm working on. Now this is my first try at it. I may make more changes, but this is, for now, first try. So I'm going to show you how I work through taking somebody else's pattern, you can do this with one of mine, and turning it into something else that you would like, but there is currently no pattern for. And the reason I've done this is we have the doll challenge coming up in March, and I will be making a doll for the side saddle, and you'll see that coming up, including the dress, and how to make it fit, because these legs need a little work to fit. So if you could, please like and subscribe, it's really appreciated. And if you have any comments about this saddle or the process on making the saddle, please leave comments below. And let's get started. So the first thing I did is took this pattern and with a piece of kangaroo, wherever there was suede, I turned it over one side and leather the other side. I did not take into account thin leather. I just put it together very quickly so I could see what it was going to look like. When I cut the pattern, what I do is I use tape. I use Scotch tape on this, and I cover the entire pattern with Scotch tape. So that way it's more durable so that I can reuse that. So the whole thing is cut. I tape it down to the wrong side of the leather and cut it out. Now with the side saddle, you have to be careful that you're cutting it on the wrong side because these things are not symmetrical. There is a right side and a wrong side. So here is the saddle that we've ended up with. So the first and the most important thing is, will it fit a doll? And because the doll will have to be modified for this, I'm just going to turn the camera off while I put it on. So the first thing we can see is this doll is going to have to be modified to sit properly on a saddle like this, and her other leg is off because that is also going to need to be modified. However, you can see she sits quite well once we have a modification going here. And if we look all the way around the saddle, there's plenty of room, and she'll be wearing a skirt, so that will cover a lot of the edges. And I'll be doing a video on a doll in March. So you can see that's an important thing to test when you're making your pattern. The next thing I want to see is how it fits on the horse compared to what I want it to fit. And if you're looking at this saddle, it is quite well balanced. It sits nicely in the middle. So the actual overall feel of the saddle is fine. And the shape of the seat for this doll is working. So now that I've created my saddle in rough, and again, it was a very rough job that I did here, the next thing I want to look at is the saddle that I want to achieve. Now this is a Steele saddle, the pattern. This is a current Western Pleasure saddle that's going to be used in Arabian Western Pleasure with side saddle. So this is what I really want to achieve. So I'm going to compare these two and see what changes I want to make and what changes I want to leave the same for the integrity of the saddle. So here I've taken some lines and drawn on some of the changes that I may decide to make on this. Taking a look, so you can see this has a bottom skirt, which the Steele saddle does not. So that means this piece would have to be a bit smaller, the upper skirt. And if you can see here, the upper skirt continues down and actually joins. So these pieces would be joined and shorter, and I'd want another lower skirt here. This area right here is lifted a little more, and I think I'd like to try to lift that in a little more. So I'm going to bring this piece along here a little longer and a little more, and I'm going to try that. Now on this side, this piece that holds the jumping horn, this, instead of being smaller, I'm going to bring this as part of, in other words, combine these two pieces, and the lower part is going to be a smaller piece that extends here. And underneath it all, you're going to have the lower skirt. Also, the horns, I'm going to make a little thinner. I like a little thinner look, very simple change. However, here, how you have this more of a Western pleasure look to the saddle, the change of the seat. I am not going to change that because the seat here in the pattern works perfectly for my doll, and I do not want to mess that up. So first off, I'm going to match this lower skirt with this piece that goes here so that I know the right location for it, and then I'm going to tape that together. Now the hardest piece is this. I want to combine with this piece right here. However, if you see that on top, this is going to get involved with this piece right here. So looking at the pattern, I taped the original piece for this down, and I'm going to place that on top and see what mods I can make where this is still going to be available. I wanted this to come out a little bit, and I'm going to play with that so that this piece is going to work as one piece. So once I've drawn on what I think will work, I'm going to cut that out and try it out. So I look at my first attempt, realizing how it's going to fit. I get a little bit extra there. I'm happy with that. I'd like the stirrup more centered, so I may just shift that a bit, and this needs more of a gap. So I'm going to have to extend that a little. And this is how you just do it. You just keep trying and redoing it. So all I'm going to do here is cut that and give it a tiny little gap between the two to give it a little more room to get in there. So by doing this and taping it down, so I want it a little closer over here, so it's even on the stirrups, and I've added a little bit of a gap, and I'll cut that and try it again. So here I'm trying the next one. And what you have to understand is what the integrity of the actual pattern is. This piece is covering up this piece, so it doesn't have to go all the way in. It can actually be cut down a bit to give more seat space if you want. So I have a little bit of working room here to work with. Give a little more room there. So if I try this on now, it goes right up there, matching everything. And now I have a little bit of space here in the gap. And I've cut that just a little bit short. So that is going to give me that piece. And now I'm going to have to take the second piece here and trim that down, which was originally this piece. So with that piece, I've taken that somewhere else. So what I'm going to do is just try this and see how I'm going to work with that. Put that in where it was and put this one on top. And that is how you're going to see what your stuff is going to look like. And if you like where it's falling, if not, adjust it again. And my stirrup's a little too long for that. So what I am going to do is take the stirrup pattern, seems to have ran away, and I'm going to shorten here so there's not as much bulk up in there. So you can see if that really needs to lose at least that much. Now when you're fixing a piece like this is the fixed head. This is going to go towards the back of the horse, and I want to move the fixed head back a little and make it thinner. So I'm going to get rid of the stuff on this side. You just got to make sure you know which side is which and make your modifications accordingly. I'm not going to change any of this, just the part above this line. Stuff like the padding that goes on that, I'm not going to fix that. I am just going to trim it as I'm making it. I just want to fix the main parts of the pattern. Now for adding the new piece, what I'm going to do is flatten that out and determine approximately how much I want extra here and where I want this to come to. So like that, mark that here. And this is just going to glue under because it's not part of the construction of the saddle. So I just need it to be hidden underneath that. And then this piece needs to come down a little more. So I've added a little distance that way to those pieces. And once I have something like this, I want to fold it in half to make sure both sides are about the same. And then I will check those lines. By cutting it out, it will show me if both sides are about the same. And once I've cut it out, I'm just having a look, see how I like that here and how that's going to go with everything. And again, I'm just gluing that underneath so it's not part of the structure of the saddle. now I've marked those thinner, but what I'm going to do is cut that in half and actually cut it so that they're the same on both sides. And once you've cut them out, you can have a look and see if things are falling in the correct place or if they still need any work. And again, this may or may not work perfectly, may have to do it more than once. For the piece on the back, I traced around here. And once I have the one, I'm just going to fold it in half and cut that out as one piece. Once you do that, you can test that and see if that's actually what you want, and if not, modify it. Now, this piece on the real saddle starts where that ends. But if I do that, that takes up a huge amount of the saddle. So you have to determine if you want that look or if you want it to be back a little more. And again, I may make it this big and then modify it as I go, because that is going all the way around almost to the front. So again, if you try to keep the integrity of the pattern, you're going to have to give up certain areas to make for other areas. So I may make this shorter, not sure yet. One way to determine it is if you don't want it to rub with the legs, I wouldn't want it to go past this point. So that is going to be my point for where I'm going to do it. Now I've got my attempted pattern. What I'm going to do is put it together. Another thing you may want to do is if you're tooling it, you're going to determine by putting pieces on top of each other what part can be tooled and what is going to be covered. So I am going to look at tooling here, right here, and I'm going to determine based on what's going to show what will be tooled. To lift this part, I'm actually just pulling the saddle apart a little bit because I want this piece to be up more. So this is the tip of here. So I'm going to add a little bit of more oomph to this because it's getting lost under there right now. So I want this piece to come up. So I've changed this, but now I'm changing the structure of her pattern. I do not know if this is going to work, but I'm going to give it a try. Now, one of the things you have to take care of is I've been working right side up. So that means I have to either put it upside down on the wrong side of the leather and cutting up, or cut it from the right side of the leather. So you have to take that into account when you're playing around with stuff like this. So here I've got all my pieces. I've marked right side if I've done any changes. The yellow is where I can tool. And if this is going to work or not, I don't know. So I'm going to cut these out and find out. One more thing you may want to take into account is if you're going to apply silver pieces, for example that on the corner, you're going to want to make sure you shape your pattern to fit nicely for that shape. One other thing I wanted to do is I want this side padded because that goes to the person's leg, but that side tooled. So I'm going to just make a few adjustments with the fabric here. So I'm going to compare all the pieces, make sure I have them all. I'm going to determine what kind of leathers I want for them all, and I'm going to start cutting them out. Another thing I do on my design, I check the color I want it and the color of the suede that is I'm going to use with that, so that I know what I'm working with. So normally I cut it with the on the wrong side. However, with this piece, it is a really rough piece of tooling leather. So I'm going to put it right side up so I can make sure I avoid any of this bad here. And I'm using this because it is more of a test. I'm not even 100% sure it's going to work. But this is a good way to test your pattern. Now once I have all my pieces cut out, and this is just of the tooling leather, what I'm going to do is determine where these are going to be, and I'm going to press them so that they leave a little mark in the leather. Now wetting the leather before you press this in is going to help you get a better mark. And it's going to be wet for tooling anyway. So once I got it there, I can press that with my fingers or with the back of a pencil or a pen. And once that's done, you can see where not to tool. So when you're tooling, you can put a line around there as part of your tooling if you want. Another way of marking these is holding that in place where you want it, and then taking your swivel tool or a knife, a sharp knife, you can trace right near it. And I'm not going through much. This is thin leather, so I'm not going through much. But now you have a line where this can then later be glued on when you're finished. The other thing you can do at this point is you can add stitch markings around anywhere you want. I'm using a pounce wheel for that. Now, this is a test. As I said, I'm using not that great of a leather. So what I need to do is find something that I can tool with that's not going to ruin this very, very thin leather. Now, when I'm using my swivel knife, it is giving me way too much and it's dragging and I'm not able to tool well. But I have 3 little tiny stamps here. They're leaves. One's a left leaf and one's a right leaf. And if I just press down, I get plenty. And I'm going to take more time. Obviously, I'm just doing it up high here. So I have 2 leaves and a little acorn. And that is enough to tool that. So I'm just going to work with that as opposed to trying to fight tooling this thin a leather. Here I've just done some basic stamping and literally took me about 15 minutes to do it all. So again, it's not perfect, but it's going to look decent on the saddle. And now I'm going to put the leather dye on. So I'm going to start building this up, following all of the instructions. And the first change I came to is the inside. Instead of one wrap, I used something nice and soft. So I used suede on the inside, and on the outside I used a piece of tooling. So I broke that piece in half. Now when you're making changes like this, you might find that you've overdone something, so you can just fake your way through it and change your pattern. So I'm going to cut that and make this a bit shorter and put something to cover that. And then I'm going to modify my pattern accordingly. Another thing you have to take into account when you're changing a pattern is the rigging. So for this one, side saddles almost always have a back cinch. However, Arabian show saddles do not, and you would have to show that with proper documentation. So I'm just going to put a decorative D there, and on the front, I'm going to take a piece with 2 Ds and stick them in like that. Now that is the rigging that I would use for an Arabian pleasure saddle. So when you make a change to a pattern, you have to understand how the rigging and how the girths attach. Now once you put together the saddle, and I haven't got a cinch on this yet because I don't know what size the horse will be, but this is where you review it. You look to see if everything's in place, if you want to make any modifications to the pattern, give it a good look over, then try a dull on it to see if it's sitting okay, like that. And one thing I wanted to point out is when you're modifying a pattern and testing it, I made this in a very, like a harder leather, and this one is in a softer leather. And the seat distance from here to here is different than from here to here. And I actually prefer this one better, but I did the exact same base. I didn't change anything from this pattern that is structural, just the outside portions. So when you're testing it, test with the weight of leather that you actually want to do. Then what I do is I take my patterns, I make any adjustments I want, and then I may remake the saddle. I'm not going to in this case because I just wanted to show you how to do it, and I needed that for the dull video. And then what I would do is put these in an envelope, and any notes you have on the actual original pattern, and my writing is horrendous. Anyways, I keep that, put this in an envelope, and put this aside so if you ever want to build that type of saddle again, you're good to go. And any notes, you should put full notes onto your paper so you understand any changes that you have made. So that's all I'm going to work with on this one. You can see, again, it's a workable, it's good enough for photos. Would I sell it? No, it's not good enough for that. You know, there's been some changes, I've done cuts, it's not perfectly glued on, I haven't done wonderful work on the silver work, but I still really like it and I'm really happy with it. So thanks for joining me, and I will see you in some upcoming videos.